There comes a moment in every life where heaven leans close, and everything that once made sense begins to unravel. You can't quite explain it to the people around you, not even the ones who've known you all your life. Something is shifting. It's not external, it's internal, but it changes everything. The way you see, the way you feel, the way you walk into rooms. The things that used to satisfy no longer do. The roles you once played feel small. You start to feel this invisible weight, not one that crushes, but one that calls. It's the stirring of spiritual authority. But make no mistake, when God begins to activate your spiritual authority, it does not arrive with applause. It often begins with pain, confusion, or divine interruption. You won't always know what's happening, only that something deep within you refuses to settle for surface anymore. Let me teach you something. Before God raises your voice, He deepens your silence. Before He gives you authority, He reorders your identity. If you're going through a strange season, a season that feels heavy or uncertain, you might not be losing your way. You might be stepping into your weight. So how do you know if this is what's happening? How can you tell if God is activating something deeper in you? Here are 5 urgent signs that God is activating your spiritual authority now. Sign 1, divine disruption. Let's begin with the most misunderstood sign, divine disruption. We tend to think of disruptions as attacks, as if the devil has thrown chaos into our plans. But not every storm comes from hell. Some storms come from heaven to reroute you to destiny. Look closely at the pattern of God throughout Scripture. He rarely enters someone's life quietly. He disrupts. He interrupted Abraham's comfort at 75 and told him to leave everything familiar. He disrupted Moses in the middle of a desert where he had been hiding in shame for 40 years. He interrupted Mary's engagement with an angel and told her she would carry the impossible. Jesus disrupted the religious systems, Peter's fishing career, Paul's reputation. God does not activate authority without shaking your foundation. And maybe that's where you are now, confused because what was once working is now falling apart. The doors you prayed for are now closing. Relationships that were once solid are dissolving. You're being pushed into unfamiliar territory, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. This is not punishment. It's preparation. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman who had worked in ministry behind the scenes for years. She never sought the stage. She served faithfully, quietly, away from recognition. But one year, everything began to crumble. Her marriage ended. Her church leadership changed. She was let go. Friends walked away. Everything she'd leaned on was shaken. She thought God had abandoned her. She didn't pray for platforms, only peace. But what she didn't realize was this: God wasn't punishing her. He was removing her scaffolding. The version of her that could only operate in the shadows had to die, because God was calling her into visible authority. A year later, doors opened across nations. She spoke with a new voice, not because she went looking for power, but because she learned to stand without the crutches. Listen carefully. When God disrupts, He is not trying to destroy your life. He's upgrading your foundation. He is preparing you to walk with authority that doesn't borrow from applause, permission, or comfort zones. Disruption is not a denial of your purpose. It is a divine endorsement. But the question is, can you survive the silence long enough to see what it's birthing? Can you trust that even what looks like loss is actually alignment? Because here is the truth. God will shake whatever you trust more than Him. Not to punish, but to purify. When He activates your authority, He strips the identity you performed so you can finally walk in the one He designed. You may feel like everything is falling apart, but look again. Things are actually falling into place. Sign 2. Increased resistance and spiritual warfare. Whenever God begins to awaken spiritual authority in your life, don't be surprised if the resistance intensifies. Opposition is often confirmation that something sacred is being birthed. We don't like to hear this. We want growth without pressure, promotion without warfare, purpose without pain. But in the spirit, pressure always precedes power. Let me tell you something real. Spiritual warfare isn't always about casting out demons in a dramatic scene. Sometimes, it's the quiet exhaustion you feel in your soul for no visible reason. It's the sudden insecurities that weren't there before. The random conflicts, the unexpected delays, the mental fog, the voice in your head whispering that you're not ready, not worthy, not enough. These aren't random. They are resistance, and they often show up right when God is calling you higher. Why? Because spiritual authority threatens spiritual darkness. And the moment you begin to walk in the truth of who God called you to be, hell loses a pawn and heaven gains a warrior. Let me tell you a story, one that doesn't sound flashy, but carries depth. There was a young man, a gifted communicator, but unnoticed. He wasn't famous. He wasn't known, but he had a heart after God. One day, after years of hidden preparation, he was asked to speak at a small church revival. It wasn't a big event, maybe 50 people in attendance. But as he stood behind the mic, something shifted. He wasn't just giving a speech. The words came with weight. People were weeping. Chains were breaking. And he felt it. Authority. Not performance. Not charisma. Authority. That night, when he got home, he couldn't sleep. He felt spiritually tormented. An overwhelming sense of darkness. Accusations in his mind. Attacks in his dreams. For 3 nights, he couldn't rest. He thought something was wrong. But what he didn't know was this. When spiritual authority is activated, spiritual opposition is automatic. Here's what you must understand. The enemy rarely attacks people who are doing nothing. He attacks people who are rising. People whose obedience threatens his grip. The resistance isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that something in you is finally waking up. Think of Jesus. Right after he was baptized and the heavens opened, and the Father declared, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." Where did he go? The wilderness. Before he healed a single person. Before he preached a single sermon. He was led by the Spirit into a fight. Because your identity must be tested before it is trusted. You want to walk in spiritual authority? Then you must learn to stand when you're under pressure. Not by might, not by power, but by the Spirit. And here's a secret. Resistance will always show up the moment you're closer than you think. The warfare is loudest at the door of breakthrough. So don't retreat. Don't collapse. Don't believe the lie that your struggle means God isn't with you. He is closer than you think. If the warfare has intensified, not because you sinned, not because you strayed, but even as you've drawn closer to God, then hear this. You're not being attacked because you're weak. You're being attacked because you're dangerous. Your spiritual authority is being activated. Stay rooted. Stay armored. And most of all, stay aligned. Sign 3, a deep identity shift. There is a moment in your spiritual journey where God no longer speaks to who you've been, but to who you truly are. And in that moment, you'll feel torn between 2 identities, the one you've built and the one heaven is birthing. This is one of the clearest signs that God is activating your spiritual authority. Your identity begins to shift at the root. Not just your habits, not just your routines, but your sense of self. Your voice changes. Your posture changes. The roles you used to play start to feel like costumes. Conversations that once energized you begin to drain you. Spaces you used to belong to now feel misaligned. You are not broken. You are becoming. Let's talk about Jacob. He was born holding someone else's heel. Chasing, competing, trying to become something. His whole life was a performance. Trickery. Pretending. Proving. He wanted the blessing of being the firstborn, but not through transformation, through manipulation. And yet, God loved him, but God also refused to bless the mask. So one night, Jacob was left alone. Everything and everyone was stripped away. And that night, he wrestled with God. It wasn't about winning. It was about surrender. And as morning approached, the angel didn't just bless Jacob. He renamed him. You will no longer be called Jacob. From now on, your name is Israel. Why? Because before God gives you authority over others, he reclaims your identity within yourself. This is where many get stuck. Because we want spiritual authority, but we don't want identity disorientation. We want power, but not the shedding of false versions of ourselves. We want elevation, but not excavation. But you cannot walk in your real spiritual assignment while clinging to a counterfeit identity. Here's a story that might hit closer to home. A woman I once counseled had been a worship leader for years. On stage, she was confident. In public, she smiled. But behind closed doors, she didn't know who she was when she wasn't leading. Her entire sense of self was wrapped up in being needed. When she wasn't serving, she felt invisible. Then, one year, everything paused. A sudden illness forced her off stage. She couldn't sing. She couldn't serve. And without the title, without the platform, she began to unravel. She said, "I don't know who I am if I'm not helping everyone else." That's when it happened. In the silence, in the stillness. The old identity crumbled. And slowly, God revealed not the worship leader, but the daughter. Not the performer, but the carrier of presence. She had been leading worship, but she didn't know how to live in worship. That year offstage broke her, and it also made her whole. Today, she doesn't just sing songs. She shifts atmospheres. Why? Because her identity is no longer borrowed, it's built. When your identity shifts from roles to roots, your authority becomes real. So if lately you've been feeling disoriented, like you're shedding layers, even ones that were once good, if you find yourself questioning who you are beyond your titles, your job, your family role, this is not a breakdown. It's a spiritual reintroduction. Heaven is reminding you of who you were before fear taught you to shrink, before survival made you pretend, before religion gave you a role, but not relationship. This season is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming real. You are not being stripped to be shamed. You are being stripped to be seen. God cannot give you true spiritual authority while you're still living in a false self. So don't fight the identity shift. Don't rush back into the familiar. Don't grab the old costume just because it feels safe. Let it fall. Let it burn. Because the moment you finally stop performing is the moment heaven begins to reveal who you really are. Sign 4. Divine isolation. There is a silence that speaks louder than 1,000 voices. A quiet where heaven does surgery on your soul. Where God strips the noise. Not because he's cruel, but because he's calling. If you found yourself suddenly alone, misunderstood, disconnected from the people you once felt close to, don't rush to fill the gap. You might be in divine isolation, a sacred season where God pulls you aside not to punish you, but to prepare you. See, there are certain things that cannot be deposited into your spirit while you're surrounded by distraction. Certain depths of anointing, revelation, and discernment can only be unlocked in solitude. Jesus had 12 disciples. Crowds followed him. But before he started his public ministry, he spent 40 days alone. Moses led a nation, but before that, he spent 40 years in the wilderness, not forgotten, but being formed. David was anointed as king, but went back to the field alone while his brothers lived under Saul's roof. Paul was called, knocked off his horse, and then sent into Arabia for 3 years of obscurity before stepping into apostolic fire. Isolation precedes impartation. Let me show you this through a real-life lens. A man once told me, I used to be surrounded by people, friends, colleagues, community. Then it all just stopped. My phone stopped ringing. The invitations dried up. And I started to wonder, what did I do wrong? But as we dug deeper, what actually happened was this. His circle had been full of noise, opinions, distractions, surface-level support. And when God began awakening his gifts, that circle couldn't hold his growth. It wasn't that they were evil. They were just insufficient for the next level. God will often isolate you from what cannot carry you. In that isolation, this man started hearing differently. Scriptures hit differently. His hunger grew. His old coping mechanisms no longer worked. But most importantly, he began to see himself clearly. That's the gift of divine isolation. It detoxes the soul from false validation. It trains your ears to hear heaven, not approval. It teaches you to be anchored, not addicted to attention. But it hurts, doesn't it? There's a pain in divine isolation that no one prepares you for, because it feels like rejection, abandonment, loneliness. It feels like you're invisible. But here's the truth. Before God announces you, he hides you. Not to withhold your purpose, but to protect it. You're not invisible. You're incubating. You're not being rejected. You're being refined. Authority doesn't come through crowds. It is born in caves. Look at Elijah, one of the most powerful prophets in history. He called down fire from heaven, literal fire, but after one moment of fear and exhaustion, he ran. And where did God meet him? Not in the earthquake, not in the fire, not in the wind, in a whisper. And to hear a whisper, you must be close. You must be still. You must be alone. That's the paradox of divine isolation. It feels like God is far, but in truth, you are being drawn closer than ever before. So if you're in a season where the phone is silent, the crowds are gone, the applause has faded, if you feel stripped of support and surrounded by quiet, you're not failing. You're being forged. God isn't subtracting your circle to hurt you. He's narrowing your atmosphere to speak without interference. Because when he activates your spiritual authority, he first trains you to hear him, not them. Let this settle deep in your soul. You do not need the presence of people to walk in the presence of God. It's in isolation that you learn the difference between community and codependency, between popularity and purpose, between being liked and being led. If you feel like God has hidden you, take heart. He hides those he intends to use, not forever, but for formation. When you come out of this cave, your voice will carry a new frequency. Your presence will shift atmospheres, not because you rehearsed, but because you were refined. Isolation isn't the end of your story. It's the place God reintroduces you to yourself, before the world sees what he's placed in you. Sign 5. Accelerated discernment. This last sign is one many overlook, yet it's one of the clearest signals that heaven is unlocking your spiritual authority. Your discernment sharpens, suddenly, deeply, and with weight. You begin to feel things before they happen. You start sensing people's true intentions, even when their words say the right things. You walk into rooms and can spiritually read the atmosphere, heaviness, confusion, pride, or peace, without anyone speaking. You can no longer tolerate what you used to excuse. It's not suspicion. It's not paranoia. It's not judgment. It's discernment. Because spiritual authority is not about charisma, it's about clarity. God will not elevate you into spiritual leadership without first fine-tuning your discernment. Why? Because influence without discernment is dangerous. You'll embrace what should be avoided. You'll entertain what should be confronted. You'll trust what should have been tested. But when God is activating your authority, he sharpens your vision. Your ears tune to what others miss. You begin to see beyond the surface. Here's a powerful example. There was a young woman who worked in media, bright, gifted, full of potential, but she was always overlooked. Then, in one particular season, something began to shift. She became more sensitive, spiritually, emotionally, relationally. Meetings that once felt fine suddenly felt off. Clients she had trusted started showing manipulation. People she called mentors began revealing controlling tendencies. She thought she was being overly sensitive. But what was really happening? Her discernment was being activated. And with that activation came clarity. She made bold decisions, ended toxic partnerships, walked away from deals, and left spaces that no longer aligned. A few months later, new doors opened. Higher ones, cleaner ones, and aligned with her calling. If you're in a season where you're suddenly seeing people's fruit more clearly, sensing shifts in conversations, feeling a new weight behind your instincts, this is not a personality change. It's a spiritual calibration. Don't ignore it. Don't water it down to gut feelings. It's not just maturity. It's the Spirit showing you what logic can't. Discernment is the sword of the Spirit, and those walking in real authority know how to use it, not to destroy, but to divide light from darkness. If your discernment is sharpening, it's because God is trusting you with spiritual responsibility, the ability to hear his whispers in a noisy world. You are being activated. If these signs resonate, if your life has been shaken, your circle has shrunk, your inner world is changing, then hear this with clarity. You are not going crazy. You are being called. You are not under attack alone. You are under construction. Heaven is not ignoring you. Heaven is anointing you. So don't curse the discomfort. Don't run from the quiet. Don't numb the stretching. This isn't random. This is divine. And the question is not, why is this happening to me? The question is, who am I becoming through this? Because what's being birthed in you carries authority. Not the kind the world gives. Not the kind that craves spotlight. But the kind that shifts rooms. The kind that breaks chains. The kind that hell recognizes even when man doesn't. And God is saying now, I'm activating your voice. I'm refining your vision. I'm giving you keys to realms that can't be faked. Stay close. Stay pure. Stay yielded. Your spiritual authority is not coming. It's already being awakened. Welcome to the becoming.